Hello, everyone. On today's podcast episode, I'm going to talk about atheism again because when I was scrolling through TikTok, I saw a video. I don't go through. When I go through TikTok, my FYP is usually random. As in, I don't only go through. I don't only look for Christian. I don't look for Christian content. I don't look for atheist content. I don't have a specific content I'm looking for on TikTok. I just scroll and scroll and scroll when I'm not busy. It's a way to relax. So while I was scrolling through TikTok, I saw a video where atheists keeps asking questions and questions and questions. And every time I hear an atheist open their mouth, it's just one wrong assumption after assumption after assumption. It's like they don't truly understand the Bible, but yet here they are constantly arguing over what's right and what's wrong. How foolish the Bible is, how foolish God is, how foolish Christians are, how foolish theists are. They keep making wrong, one faulty assumption after another, and they're always begging, theists or Christians to explain what the Bible says. If you don't, what I'm trying to say is, if you don't understand the Bible, then how can you be an atheist? If you don't fully understand, what the Bible is saying, why are you still an atheist? As in, it doesn't make any logical sense for you to, it doesn't make any logical sense for you to not understand, the field you're in. If you're an atheist, you think you're someone who has a full knowledge of the Bible. You have a full understanding of words, of how words work etymologically, and you understand the full hidden meanings of words. You have a good definition of how Hebrew words work, how the words of the Bible work. But when I see an atheist, they have no understanding of the Bible in any way, shape, or form. They're always the most, unknowledgeable people when it comes to the Bible. They don't have a full understanding of the world itself. Yet here they are constantly, making assumptions as if they're right. It doesn't cross their mind that they could be wrong. You can't even prove that God doesn't exist. Yet here you are as an atheist making, claiming that he doesn't exist without evidence and still acting as if you're the one who's in the right position. You're the one making the right, claim. You don't have evidence to prove that God doesn't exist. If you don't have evidence to prove that God doesn't exist, you shouldn't be making claims that God doesn't exist. You don't have a full understanding of what God is. The God of the Bible, El. The word El is synonymous with everything. So when you're saying the God of the Bible, you're saying everything of the Bible. Because God is omnipresent. Being omnipresent, the word El and the word everything are synonymous. This is why the word all has A-L at the beginning. A-L means God. Al means God. You can't say the word God and say the word, without saying the word everything. You can't say the word everything without implying God. You can't say God without implying everything. The word God and everything in the Bible, every time you see that word, it's synonymous, with everything. Every time you see everything, it is synonymous with God. God and everything are the same thing. So by saying that God doesn't exist, you're saying that everything doesn't exist. That's exactly what you're saying. When an atheist says that God doesn't exist, he's saying that everything does not exist. Can he prove, can an atheist prove that everything does not exist? Because that's what God is. God is everything, omnipresent. That's the definition of God, omnipresent. So when you see the word God, know that they're actually implying everything. Is the basic definition of God, everything. This is how the world works. Atheists do not truly understand what they're dealing with when it comes to the Bible. They should not really, do not even have a full understanding of the words written in the Bible. The real words, not the English version, but the Hebrew words. They do not have a full depth of what the Bible is actually stating. Yet here they are, always making assumption after assumption. They jump to conclusions constantly, and always begging. And then they always end up begging Christians, creationists, or theists to help them figure it out. And yet, even now, they still don't. They still would not listen. It's hard to change someone who won't listen. It's hard to reason with someone who will never, listen to your, arguments, because they've already drawn a false conclusion that you're wrong. Atheists have already drawn the false conclusion that theists are wrong, that everything does not exist, because they already believe that everything does not exist. Nothing we do will ever truly change their minds. They're too illogical to understand that believing that everything does not exist without evidence is very idiotic. It's not a smart thing to believe that everything does not exist, because that's what God is. God is everything. When people say God, they automatically, implying everything. When people say everything, they're automatically implying God. Those two words are synonymous. If you don't have a full understanding of the words used in the Bible, don't make assumptions that you understand what's going on. You have no true understanding of what's going on in the Bible. If you need a theist to explain what words in the Bible mean, you don't understand what's going on in the Bible. If you don't have a full understanding of what's going on in the Bible, stop making assumptions. That's your problem. You don't understand the Bible in any way, shape, or form. Because you don't understand the Bible in any way, shape, or form, that's why you keep believing that God doesn't exist. Because you don't have a true understanding, a real understanding of the Bible. That's why you don't believe that God exists. It's because you haven't taken your time to truly study the Bible. You haven't taken your time to truly listen to what theists are telling you. You're not paying attention to anything anyone is telling you. You've already drawn an illogical conclusion. Because you've already drawn an illogical conclusion, it is impossible to change your mind with logic. You're already a closed-minded person. Your very state, your very atheistic state is a closed-minded state. Is the state of someone who's already decided that God doesn't exist without evidence. You don't have evidence that everything does not exist. You have to prove to us that everything does not exist before you believe that everything does not exist. If you just believe that God doesn't exist without proof, you're the illogical one. And it's easier, if you want to prove that God doesn't exist, you first have to prove that you don't exist. If you can prove that you don't exist, you can prove that God doesn't exist. It's that easy. If you can prove that you don't exist, you can prove that everything does not exist. If you can prove that everything does not exist, you can prove that you don't exist. That's how, that's how you need to see things, in life. Is that it's hard to prove that God doesn't exist because, he does. Because God is everything. The God of the Bible is everything. So, and what I mean by, that's how everything is in life, is that the most illogical people always act as if they make the most logical sense. The most illogical people are always the ones who draw conclusions without evidence, without any logical evidence whatsoever. They just believe things and there's nothing you can do to change their minds. But this is how life works, There will always be people who aren't smart enough to think logically in life, There are people with Down syndrome. Do you know there are actually people with Down syndrome without, that do not look like they have Down syndrome? Yes. There are people with mild Down syndrome. People with mild Down syndrome, may never be able to understand, any form of logic. The deeper the logic is, the more complicated the logic is, the harder it is for them to understand. And that's the problem with life, is that there's smart people in this world and there are dumb people in this world. Dumb people in this world will believe things without evidence. And there's nothing you can do as a theist, as a human being, to change their minds. When someone is insane, it is impossible for them to know that they're insane, because it requires a sane mind to know whether you're insane or not. You first have to be sane to know that you're insane. But because you're insane, you can't know that you're insane. And that's the problem with atheists. They do not know, they're incapable of realizing that they're not making any logical sense being atheists. Because they're incapable of logically realizing that their very existence makes no logical sense. They just run around in circles, debating here, debating there, yelling at theists, mocking theists, mocking people with a good understanding of the Bible, mocking people with good understanding of the world around them. The world is far more complicated than atheists believe it is. There's far more hidden knowledge in this world than you can possibly imagine. And most of the hidden knowledge in this world paints a whole different picture and doesn't contradict science in any way. It paints a different picture of the world. It paints a picture of a scientific world. It paints a picture of a scientific world. A scientific world that can only exist because of God. That's the world we live in. It's a scientific world that can only exist because God exists. And that's what Yahweh, that's another the other definition of Yahweh, the God of the Bible. That very name is I create existence because I exist. That's what I am that I am. That's a different way of phrasing I am that I am. I create existence because only I exist. That's what the name of the God of the Bible is. And it's the truth. God exists. And that's why he can create existence. Because only God exists. That's what omnipresence means. Omnipresent means that the only thing that truly exists is God. Everything is an illusion created by God. The only thing that exists in this world is God. Everything else is an illusion created by God. You may think I'm lying, right? Well, let me give you an example. Your cells, right? No, atoms. The atoms in your body creates your body, right? But you don't see the atom. You see your body. Your body is an illusion created by atoms. But you'll never see the atoms. You'll only see your body. That's how it works. Your body is an illusion created by God, but you will never see God because God is omnipresent. You will only see your body. Atoms are illusions created by God, but you will never see God. You will only see atoms. Let me give you another example. Think of a person in your head, right? Imagine a human being in your head. You don't have to give him a name. You can give him a name, right? That human inside your head can be considered fake, right? The imagination in your head, you never say that imagination is real, right? But that very imagination is both real and not real. Do you know why that imagination is both real and not real? It is both you and not you at the same time. It's because it's an imagination, right? It means it's not real. But because it takes your energy, your mind to create it, it's a projection of your mind. Since it's a projection of your mind, it is also real at the same time. That image that you created, that person that you created, we never think that you exist. But it can't exist without you. that imaginary person that you created in your head will never think, will look around itself and will never see you. But just because it doesn't see you does not mean you don't exist. And that's the dichotomy that we face. Just because you don't see God does not mean God does not exist. Because you can't exist in this world without God. You can't exist in this world without energy. Just because you don't see your cells does not mean your cells do not exist. You can't exist without your cells. Just because you don't see your atoms does not mean your atoms do not exist. Because you can't be alive without atoms. Your body is created, your body is an illusion created by atoms. Just like the person you created in your head is an illusion created by your mind, your body is an illusion created by atoms. So your body is both real and not real at the same time. Just like that, your imagination, that person you created in your head is both real and not real at the same time. That person, every part of that person is you. So that means you're omnipresent. Within that person, you are omnipresent. Everything inside your imagination is you. Within your imagination, you are omnipresent. But yet, no matter where you look inside your imagination, no matter how many imaginary worlds you create, no matter where you look, you will never be able to find yourself in it. But yet, that world that you create is you. It requires you for it to exist. It can't exist without you. And that's how this world works. We can't exist without God. Everything is God, and God is everything. You can't exist without your atoms. Yet you can never see your atoms. You can only see yourself. And that's how this whole world works. God is the very source of existence. And because He's everything, people can't see, are incapable of realizing that He exists. This is why the word God and everything are synonymous. Because there's no difference between everything and God. There's no difference between God and everything. God is everything, and everything is God. So when an atheist tells you that God doesn't exist, he's literally telling you that He doesn't exist. That He himself, the atheist, doesn't exist. And that everything around him doesn't exist. Just because he doesn't see the cells does not mean the cell does not exist. God is the source of existence because only God exists. When I say, many people will say no, but science also say the same thing. Energy is all there is, right? Energy is all there is. Everything is an illusion created by energy. It's all, and energy and God are synonymous. Energy is omnipresent, God is omnipresent. Energy is intelligent, God is intelligent. You can't say energy is not intelligent because you're an illusion created by energy. You are an illusion created by energy. If you're intelligent, energy by default is intelligent. So God and energy are synonymous. You're saying the same thing. When you say God, you're saying energy. When you say energy, you're saying God. Because God is omnipresent. God is everything. Everything including energy. When you're saying God, you're saying everything. When you say everything, you're saying God. So, and there's so much more when it comes to the Bible. The Bible is not something you just read. If you truly want to have an in-depth understanding of the Bible, you truly have to understand words. You truly have to understand the concept of duality. In this world, real and fake come together. They exist simultaneously. Like your imagination, it is both real and fake at the same time. Your body is an illusion created by atoms, so it is both real and fake at the same time. Your mind is an illusion created by atoms, so it is both real and fake at the same time. Color is an illusion created by atoms, So color is both real and fake at the same time. Reality is an illusion. But because, God is real, everyone is also real. Your imagination is an illusion, but because you are real, your imagination is also real. That's how it works. You cannot separate illusions from reality. You cannot separate reality from illusion. They work together simultaneously. They came together simultaneously. Just like you can't separate left from right. You can't separate before from after. You can't separate up from down. You can't separate movement from non-movement. You can't separate cold from hot. They exist together. In order for you to understand what hot is, the concept of cold must exist. In order for you to understand what positive is, the concept of negative must exist. In order to understand the concept of big, the concept small must exist. In order to understand the concept of movement, non-movement must exist. In order to understand the concept of fast, slow must exist. These things come together as one. Existence and non-existence come together as one, and then exist together simultaneously. Without existence, there's no such thing as non-existence. And without the concept of non-existence, there's no such thing as existence. You don't exist, yet you also exist. Everything is real, but it's also an illusion. And that's how life works. We live in a world where both concepts exist simultaneously. Just like, in the quantum physics world, light exists, can be both a wave and a particle at the same time. Yes, I'm not making this up. In the quantum world, light is both a wave and a particle at the same time. Both opposites exist simultaneously, and they're always one. Existence and non-existence exist simultaneously, and they are one. They're two sides of the same coin. Just like, or they're two sides of the same magnet. A positive side and a negative side. Up and down are two sides of the same magnet. Before and after are two sides of the same magnet. Cause and effect are two sides of the same magnet. It's a world of duality, and everything comes together as one. Both opposites come together at the same time. So God is both real and not real at the same time. Everything is real and also an illusion at the same time. God is everything and also nothing at the same time. So that's it for today's podcast episode. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.